Welcome to the China EVs and More podcast. We will open the room up at around the 40-minute mark to anyone who's keen to ask us any questions. So feel free to post them into X, LinkedIn, or YouTube. In the next hour or so, my co-host, Lei Xing, and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the global EV, AV, and mobility sectors. And boy, oh boy, the last couple of weeks have had some doozies. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. For those that are new to the show, welcome. And to our loyal listeners and viewers, welcome back. We ask that you smash those subscribe and like buttons so you don't miss anything from us in the future. Lei and I are two of the most knowledgeable people in the world doing this, so help us get the word out about this show to others. My name is Tu Lee. I'm the managing director at Sino Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.substack.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei, about to graduate having a daughter from 8th grade. Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, a well-rested after a 5-week China trip, but already looking forward to the next China trip. Good morning. This is your co-host Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review. And this is episode number 210, correct? I lost
2010,
track
yes.
because we had a pause last week, but I was just watching the Maxtro S800 launch. The penthouse on wheels and the Hefei Phantom, akin to the Hangzhou Bay Cullinan, right? So the latest and the greatest, right? I mean, the ET9 was pretty luxury. Somebody called it luxury at its peak, but the Maxwell S800 is on another level. And just one of the things happening, as you alluded to, over the last couple of weeks that we were not doing this live, a lot of scrutiny in the China EV space recently.
Well, we're starting to see the effects of a 3-year price war.
Oh yeah, about the price war, right? We were in the midst of another. One of the titles of the report said it was a ruthless price cut put on by BYD, and then Geely followed, Chery followed, Cadillac kind of followed, and then we had the S90 launch yesterday. Basically, 100. I tweeted it was 150,000 RMB off for a limited time, and
That would be about $24,000 for those trying to get around the FX.
the significance of this latest price cut is now you can get a pretty good EV with smart assistant driving capabilities under $10,000 in the US, and with the launch of
Not in the US, in USD.
in China. I mean, in China, not in the US, not yet, maybe not ever.
不可以，不可以。
And for under $20,000, you could get a EV with all scenario, including city, urban, NOA, put on by the XPeng Mona MO3 Max.
Take that, Mary.
That's where we are right now in China.
Take that, Mary. Because there's no advantage in technology. So, anyways.
And because of this latest price cut, I think BYD has gotten into, I think their share price dropped. And then there's been some scrutiny about the so-called zero mileage cars.
Well, there's a couple things going on, Lei, because the Great Wall Motor CEO called BYD in so many words the
He
Evergrande of
didn't
autos.
directly call BYD out, but
He didn't directly call them out, but he alluded to
yes.
BYD being the Evergrande of autos. That's pretty slanderous to me. But
Mm-hmm.
I do want to dig deeper into these zero mileage used cars because one thing about BYD is that they do have a lot of capacity that needs to go somewhere. And if they reduce their torrid pace of growth, that means they will have some excess capacity. And we're seeing that they're shipping a lot of cars to Brazil because they're anticipating some tariffs. So lots going on. The BYD business model is getting more complicated by the day, as I'd kind of alluded to in the past. Once you go international, it gets really, really, really complicated. So
We talked about it at our roundtable, right? Just right before we talk a lot about BYD and kind of the challenges. But the thing is, let me ask you, in the U.S. market, is zero mileage cars a common occurrence, or is that a no-no?
So the only
Uh,
thing that I can equate to that, Lay, is like these demo cars where they might sponsor a golf tournament or they might sponsor some type of event and they can't sell them as new. But I've never really seen anything like what's being described. And we all know that these graveyards that people had talked about years ago in China, those were real, but the volumes were much smaller than people made them out to be.
mhm.
So I do know from lessons about my friends that had licenses to sell vehicles in China, small niche brands, that dealers get a little antsy if they have to hold on to inventory for a long time. And they'll sell at a discount in order to move that inventory out. And there's probably a ton of pressure from BYD to take more inventory. Now, again, I've only heard about it, this week, and so like you, I think we need to do a bit more digging
Yep.
with our
Uh,
friends and kind of people we trust. So
So, from my own personal knowledge, the zero mileage cars is not something that has happened recently. I've seen this picked up here and there even before the pandemic. But for Jack Wei, the chairman of Great Wall Motor, to talk about 3,000, 4,000 kind of the used car dealers to operate this way, I think shows something that this became uh, rampant maybe over the recent years than it was before. And for this to be called out by him shows that there's lacks in the kind of the regulatory supervisional environment. Was there a blind eye for this to have happened? And the rampant and the widespread, the way Jack Wade described it, I think was the issue. And he didn't call out BYD directly. So the question is, who, if BYD, I think there was some also Xiaomi SU7 zero mileage cars on platforms that I've seen. Um, I mean, how many brands are involved?
but
Uh,
the BYD is significant because the scale of the SU7, they've only sold 200,000 cars, so it can't be like
right,
50,000 cars are zero mileage
right,
used cars.
right.
So is it concerning to that Xiaomi
And,
is associated with this? Yes, but it's not 4.5 million units on the base concerning.
and remember the reason that Great Wall Motor had this beef with BYD to begin with was this fuel tank issue that happened about 2 years ago, and that's still under investigation. That was something that was brought up by Great Wall Motor. Uh, so when this zero mileage car happens, what does China do to kind of investigate and find out who's responsible and who are going to be penalized, if at all? I think that's what we're going to want to see going forward. But it could be many brands are doing this, uh,
I would
including
anticipate there.
BYD. We're
I
all
would anticipate
speculating,
there are. I would
right?
anticipate there are. So
Part of it is the market pressure. Part of it is the price war. Part of it is the bloodbath. Part of it is also there's this export kickback. I think when you export these cars that are kind of registered and then export them to developing countries, there's a huge volume of that's kind of like the zero mileage cars, from my understanding. Um, so that's the kind of scrutiny that we're seeing. Uh, and again, right, when you're number one, I tweeted that you're public enemy number one, and everybody's gonna come here after
but there
you.
was a response. Li Yunfei did
Yeah,
respond.
he posted quite a few um, data, quite a lot of data,
Financial
saying,
data,
yeah,
and
debt ratio,
he
all that stuff. But
and he compared BYD's numbers to foreign legacy
yeah,
numbers.
yeah,
And we know in the United States that many people and companies borrow from tomorrow to pay for today. And
yeah,
if you think and look at the ratios that he's communicated versus a GM debt ratio versus a Ford debt ratio, it's not as alarming. So I think number one, I have to trust him until I hear differently,
I,
and
that's
it is what I will say is that you and I saw plenty of BYDs in the time I was there when we were on the road for 900 miles or 600 miles or whatever. So, um, but
the-
this is echoes the real estate market where there are empty buildings that got built because the Chinese government incentivized real estate development companies to build. And are we going to have a shakeout like um, the real estate development industry? I guess the Great Wall Motor CEO is implying that that could happen because he's calling companies Evergrande. Evergrande had what $400 billion of debt or $40 billion of debt or some crazy number. And so I just don't know. I don't see BYD being that. But we just have to dig deeper.
yeah. I mean, with every all of these, we take, you know, I think Liu Yunfei in his post, he was also trolling Great Wall Motor for under delivering in their NEV uh, performance. And Jack Wei, he's kind of a straight shooter. I think he likes to talk, you know, uh, pretty straight on things that he sees as issues. And then plus the fact that they are kind of behind. If we look at the rankings of the Geelys, the BYDs, the Cherries, the Changlans, Great Wall Motor has kind of fallen behind a little bit. Not only on overall vehicle sales, but on NEVs, right? So there's a bit of, I don't know, anxiety, angriness, all rolled into it. And then you take these words with a grain of salt. Even for Liu Yunfei, I mean, he posts all these data, and they're all coming subjectively from their own mouth. And we'll have to see what actually, if there's any investigation at all that will look into this. But the fact of the matter is, yes, the price wars, the world wars, is race to the bottom, and casualties will come out of this.
Here's the other thing that's really important, Lay, is that there's going to be a lot of "I told you so's" from foreign talking heads. So
And the fact that Chevy is leaving China. I mean, I think we talked about this last year already. That Chevy's done. So not surprising at all that now GM's kind of focused on the Buick and the Cadillac, because we said that the Buick is now their premium play in the NEV space. Cadillac is kind of like the new Buick. Right? They had this new XT4 launched with this no bargain pricing, $20,000. In the US, it's
and
$45,000. So,
and I did feel some momentum going to the Buick booth and the Cadillac booth. So it wasn't like years past. Let me just say that.
yeah. Uh,
But also with regards to GM, they closed the Durant Guild due to the tariffs,
right.
the reciprocal tariffs, because the Durant Guild, for those that don't know, was a small service that imported the GM's highest end vehicles, so like the Escalade, the Corvette, the Tahoe. But now those vehicle pricing, which were already really, really substantially high, make it impossible to sell with the tariff, and they decided to close up the Durant Guild. Which,
Yeah.
so here's a couple things: the Durant Guild, nobody knows, and nobody in China knows who Durant is. And the guild, what is the guild? They should have simplified it, and or it was just the weirdest um, business. I don't know what to call it, man. It was just weird.
I mean, there was that showroom right next to the Neo House in Shanghai, the first Neo House in Shanghai that we did the recording in. And that could be history. And then next time we go back, it might not be there.
It won't. It will not be there. I guarantee you that, dude.
Yeah.
Not with China speed. So,
Yeah.
um,
And
you saw that Neta is going through some things.
I mean, yeah, yeah, there's all kinds of things going on.
And the theme here, everybody, is that people were wondering when foundations were starting to get a little bit less firm. And Great Wall Motor, there's probably some jealousy, some animosity because of the engine thing that you're talking about,
Fuel tank.
or the fuel tank thing that you're talking about. But there's a little bit of to your point, man. BYD has this bullseyes on bullseye on its
Bullseye.
back.
Target on their back.
And so, but if there's a modicum of truth, that is really going to take some shine off BYD for sure.
Yeah, and it's not ending, right? This is the latest in a series of actions that BYD will take as soon as they see, let's say, for example, the Geely Xingyuan is really cutting into the Dolphin and the Seagull market share. And hence, you saw what happened when immediately after BYD announced a new 50,000, 60,000 RMB Seagull, Geely came out with their own counter, putting it in the same range. And it's going to happen again.
So BYD is getting a taste of its own medicine.
Yeah, yeah.
They're basically getting undercut. And for the last 4 or 5 years, they were doing the undercutting every single time. And this represents the ultra competitiveness of the China market. And with Geely and BYD really, really leading the way. Geely with multiple brands leading the way, whereas BYD, it's still predominantly the BYD brand with Fangcheng Bao, Yangwang kind of struggling. Denza's doing okay-ish. I think they could do a lot better because I like their cars. The Yangwang and the Fangcheng Bao, they're nice, but they don't stand out the way they should at a million RMB and prices like that. Fang Chongbao is already discounting its vehicles, so BYD needs to go back to the drawing board on that brand and create some better positioning for it in China.
Yeah, as we said before, nobody's immune, whether you're at the top or bottom.
But this makes and one of the biggest things. So I spoke with Nori and he posted an article about the price cuts from BYD. Are you surprised, Lei? Because this is early in the year for them to be so aggressive. And I mentioned that to Nori, and this points to what you and I or you have been really, really calling out as a bloodbath for the
Yep.
last few years.
Well, in terms of seasonality, when you pass March, April, kind of the peak in the first quarter, as you enter the summer, early summer months, you do have another lull, kind of.
Hmm.
So not surprised to see these people launching this limited time offerings until June 30th, which is the end of second quarter. Um, and then
And
really the July,
basically, they exhale for the summer
yeah,
and then come back hard in September.
yeah, exactly. So keep pushing.
And one of the things that I also wanted
And
to bring up, Lei, is that UBS reported that in a research report that Tesla is no longer a technology leader in China. Surprise, surprise. We've said that for several months, probably a year. So
they're a technology leader, but right, probably not in China, given these newer. The Maxwell S800 is the latest example of what could be, uh, 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 in terms of features. And so, yeah, I got that cough too. Okay.
so one thing that were you there still when they put the U7 in the Beijing showroom? The Xiaomi?
No, just
Okay.
happened a couple of days ago.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So Lei Jun and Xiaomi thought that they needed to get the SU7 tragedy behind them, and they finally unveiled the U7. They have one sitting in a showroom in Beijing. A few of our friends have gone and posted about it. So maybe they feel comfortable now that they're far enough away from that event or that tragedy that they can try to turn the page. Will social media let them? I don't know, because I'm still seeing accidents and accidents. You saw that wedding where there's 4
Yeah.
Su7s that got
Yeah.
into an
Yeah.
accident.
But
So
sometimes, uh, uh, I, I don't know. I mean, given these viral videos of accidents, does it hurt or help the brand? I don't know, to be honest. What I
it
do
does
know,
seem like
yeah,
suspiciously like companies are piling on or something.
what I do feel like is yes, I think the SU7 is largely behind for now, and the focus has been turned toward the U7. Um, as you know, this weekend actually is the Shenzhen, Macau, Hong Kong Auto Show that they're actually showing the U7, but you can only see the exterior, I think, or you cannot kind of open the door and go in. And then they're putting these vehicles into showrooms all over China, and then the official launch is July. It's gonna sell out quickly, just like the Su7. I don't have any doubt.
I have no doubt, and
I
I'm
have
in
no doubt.
complete
Yeah,
agreement that it's going to sell out
yeah.
this year. No
Uh,
doubt.
so, I mean, um, and they're still have a lot of orders for the Su7. Um, and
Wow.
the on the earnings call, the president William Lu, I think he was kind of like trolling. Also, it's like we don't have one single competitor for the Su7. uh,
Oh, goodness. One thing I did want to ask you, because I didn't get to sit and watch it or even look at any of the numbers or big bullet point takeaways. Can you tell us a little bit about the Li Auto earnings?
Oh, the auto earnings, yeah, I had I think really one of the focus was on i8, upcoming i8, and what the selling point was, the styling, the spaciousness, the latest VL8 vision language action driver model that will launch with the IA and then pushed out OTA into other 80 Max models. That's going to be
So
another
let's backtrack. Like the i8 is going to be the first fully electric
SUV
7-seat SUV.
SUV like the L8,
We
basically.
aren't talking about the BMW i8. We are
No,
talking about the Li Auto
I8.
SUV i8.
Yeah, yeah. And then, I think one of the things they talked about was their positioning of the EREV is for the ICE owners to change over to, and the positioning of the I series is for the current NEV owners to upgrade to. And then they talked about the RMB 200,000 and above NEV market. There's a market scale of 3.8 million units, and about 2.1 million is BEVs. So that's a huge pie that can tap into. And they hope that when the IA launches, they have 2,500 supercharging stations, 5C supercharging stations, where this car can be charged 500 kilometers in 10 minutes. Some of the selling points.
So
Uh,
if you look at the the pictures that they have released, it's like a Li Auto L8 and the Mega had a baby.
yeah,
It doesn't look
basically,
much like an SUV.
basically,
It
yeah.
looks more like an MPV, to be honest with you. And so this is aimed squarely at Fangcheng Bao. It's aimed squarely at the Neo ES8, um, the L8 or M8 from Ito,
Mm-hmm.
and but the M8 is an actual EREV. So um, I hope that, because I believe the Mega is a great car. It flopped from a
It,
sales standpoint because it
yeah.
was 800,000 RMB, but I think it's a good car.
So the
Now,
Mega, they mentioned the Mega previously was about 1,000 units a month. Now it's at about 2,500 to 3,000 units a month
hmm,
after the launch of the home. That's what they expect. So think about it. They're also talking about the L series returning to 50,000 a month. So I think within Q2 we may be seeing 50,000 to 60,000 um, monthly sales for the auto, and they still have 640,000. I think it's still the sales target this year. They did about, I think based on the guidance, they're going to do about 220,000 in the first half, which means they got to do over 400,000 in the second half. You can kind of do the math. And with the launch of the I series, the i8 is coming in July and the i6 is in September. Um, that's
the I series vehicles will be built in Beijing
that's correct.
alongside with the Mega,
Yeah.
because the BEVs will all be built, I think, in Beijing,
Yep.
and the E-Revs are all built in Changzhou, I think. So,
Mm-hmm. And then now we have kind of in terms of competition, right? We can look forward to quite a few. Um, I'm not sure, blockbuster, but the XPeng G7, P7, the Li Auto new I series, the updated Neo 5566. They're ramping. Um, I think the three, right? The Wei Xiaolis are added again. I think that's what we
so
can look forward
I
to.
think what we should make clear is that Li Auto is not a big player internationally. So that's why I think you and I talk so much about Neo and Xpeng generally more than we do Li Auto. But you've driven them, I've driven them. The Li Auto vehicles are great. I mean,
Yeah,
the
I drove the Mega.
interiors are amazing. The fit and finish. I don't really like that brown orange color of the interior, but quality stuff, man. And I would definitely consider an L6 or an L7 if it was for sale in the United States.
Yeah.
You
Uh,
know, they all look the same. If you squint, you can't tell which one is which. If you stood them side by side, it'd be hard to tell, you know, which one is bigger, how much bigger it is. You could tell the difference between an L6 and an L9 for sure, but all these other ones, they all look the same, unfortunately.
yeah.
And
Um,
but
and
the i8 is going to look different, but I don't think in a good way. So
that's kind of been the successful um, ingredient, I guess, the way Li Auto has put on the L series. Even though it looks the same, but the price differently. Everything is standard except urban levels of it's Pro versus Max. The chips are different, the capabilities are different, but everything else is the same. So that's
and
kind of their play.
and we
Um,
should also
and,
call out the fact that they're premium-ish. So they're more expensive than Xpeng, almost as expensive as Neo. I think Neo's pushed down pricing a little bit to be
well,
where Li Auto is, but
yeah,
The L9's pretty expensive. I think it's like 65 US or something like that.
400,000 RMB.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So Li Auto, I mean, they talk about taking the market share in the NEVs above maybe 200,000, which they have about close to 15% of that market. So
and it's reflected in their share price.
yeah,
That they're doing
yeah,
pretty well
yeah,
on the higher end vehicles.
yeah.
So one other thing that we should talk about is Neo's rollout of NWA.
Today, just rolled
Yeah.
out today on
hmm
400,000 Banyan vehicles. That was interesting. They rolled it out in their
NWA stands for Neo
new new world model
New World New
model
World 什么
model
model.
new world model. Yeah.
So
And I was saying that they pushed it out into the existing vehicles first, and then at the end of June they push it out into the new ET9 and the 5566 because they have the new Cedar OS. So that's kind of
and
interesting.
no more Nvidia Orin. The ET9 had 4 Nvidia Orin chips. Now it has 1 Shenji chip
Hmm.
running intelligent driving.
Yeah.
So that's a huge divergence from the and this should concern Jensen Huang in a big way.
Well, speaking of, they had to take an 8 billion charge, right, on the H20 restrictions. They're still growing, but uh, I think for Neo, their number one priority this year, guess what? It's to break even. And uh, right, how they do press conferences, what kind of cost actions they're going to take, right? Shenji is part of it. Uh, so unlike Li Auto, I mean, they're confident the vehicle margin are staying around 19%, 20%. Uh, that's making Neo jewel, I think, right? When you're already profitable. And at the same time, I think Firefly, if you look at the price war of what you can buy at the price of the Firefly, that adds a lot of pressure to increase volumes on that car. Um, so I think their lineup currently, I actually look at the new Neos. Maybe they'll be doing quite well, hopefully, or I feel like, based on the traffic that we're seeing. Uh,
They
but
create momentum, but they can't sustain it. I think that's the best way to describe Neo. They
yeah,
create positive momentum with their launches, and Li Bin is a very endearing CEO. I think people, you know, Chinese consumers really like him, but they just can't sustain the momentum.
yeah, and the other extreme is XPeng, which I think they have all the momentum they can have right now. The new Mona, the P7 G7's unveiling next month. Globally, export, hitting on all cylinders. Yeah, I mean that's how. I think because we're pretty close to all three of these companies, and sometimes we kind of
No,
try to pull
I'm gonna
them.
be I'm gonna be honest with you. We talk about them and I like them a lot because their cars are great.
Yeah.
They're not. I I I would drive as a daily driver a Neo, an XPeng, or a Liotto, full stop. And I drive an Ionic 5. It's great. Range is terrible. That's the problem I have with the Ionic 5. It's very clean, very simple. The infotainment is a little clunky from a design standpoint, but I'm the one thing. So I have that Ionic 5 until the end of the year because it's a 1 year lease, a 13-month lease, and I need to get another car. And I'm thinking hybrid because of everything that's happening in the United States,
It's going
unfortunately.
backward.
And so, it's disheartening. It's really so. For those that have any interest, I wrote an op-ed. I was at the Mackinac Policy Conference.
I
So,
saw that.
um, so here, if this is Michigan, this
You were
is
at the
the
very
Lower
top, is that correct?
Peninsula, and this is the Upper Peninsula, and there's a bridge, the Mackinac Bridge, and it takes you to an island, or it takes you from the Upper Peninsula to the Lower Peninsula, and then there's an island called Mackinac Island, and every year at the Grand Hotel, they have a policy conference, and any one that wants to run for the mayor of Detroit, because this is a election year for the mayor of Detroit, and
You weren't running, were
Gretchen.
you?
No. So Gretchen Whitmer, who has been the two-term governor, she's going to term out, and there was almost I think every candidate that is going to run for governor. So there's a lot of business entities and then a lot of political folks, current state reps. I had the pleasure of driving in a bus from the ferry that took us to the island and took us back to the mainland to the airport, about a 25-minute drive, with Debbie Dingle, who's the House representative
Right.
for Ann Arbor.
Mm-hmm.
And she saw our panel, so she was like, saw your panel. So if I can backtrack, I was invited up there to be a speaker with John McElroy, who needs no
No
introduction.
introduction. That's right.
A Guy Gordon, who is a local anchor, retired anchor for one of the local news channels, so very well recognized in Michigan. Pat Dorima, who is the CEO of Martin Rea, a tier 1 supplier, and Robert Lee, or Bob Lee, who is the CEO of LGES, LG Energy Systems, for North America. So the title of the panel was basically steering Michigan's signature industry through complex times. And I thought it was amazing. I thought having Bob on the panel was good because he represents what I want and what I believe to be the future of U.S. transportation, and that's clean energy suppliers, specifically on the battery side. And so we had some good conversations offline that were kind of private that I'll leave. But panel discussion was all about tariffs, was all about labor, automation, what's the UAW's role in the future. And I challenged, because Guy Gordon was like, give me, what you're hopeful for. And I said, and I actually flipped it around and I said, what are going to be the blue collar jobs? Because, in the Midwest, the UAW blue collar manufacturing job is such a historically important position. But in my opinion, and John McElroy had brought this up because he went to this Automate conference where they showed all these manufacturing robots and things like that. And he was like, I said, if we're going to compete with China, there needs to be more automation because, and John had brought this up. If a robot costs $250,000, it doesn't sleep, so it can run 24/7. It doesn't have smoke breaks. It doesn't have health insurance. So it pays for itself in a year because a UAW worker might make 120,000, but with health benefits, with vacation and other fringe, it could be close to $200,000 for
Yeah.
which is a great living, which is a great living. And so, this is I'm glad they had me because I brought, hey man, I know what we're competing against. And so they all agreed. The tone is a lot different too now because, when we came back, Lei, there's a lot of denialism and and let's say disbelief that the Chinese could be so good or become so good in such a short period of time. That's not happening anymore. Although Mary Barra did have an interview with the Wall Street Journal,
Yeah, I saw that.
and it's unfortunate that she said that they don't have a technology advantage, and the the industry or the sector was largely built on subsidies and stuff. We've gone through this, just acknowledge the fact that everybody gets subsidies. Europeans and Americans call them something different.
Hmm.
Now, we could argue the size of the subsidies, but the fact that you're saying that they don't have an advantage, but you're using Momenta as your intelligent driving partner in China, that should say something, I think.
Sure
So
is. Yeah.
um anyways, I'm jumping off my soapbox. It was a great couple of days. I learned a ton, man, and I learned firsthand how important politics is, shaping policy and shaping economic development, specifically for the state of Michigan, but I think we can extrapolate that out. The coolest thing, Lei, uh, first night, because I was a speaker, I got invited to this private dinner. Grant Hill was there,
Oh,
um,
okay.
and the keynote like programming was Mike Tirico, who is the announcer for
NBC.
NBC Sports,
Yeah.
interviewed Jared Goff.
Okay.
And so
That's cool.
that was so cool, man. And listening to Jared, I think he's made Michigan his home for a big part of the year, and yeah, so that was really cool. Great experience, and Mackinac, man, it's so pretty, so pretty. Uh, we'll have to go vacation with our families up there. You fly over or
I've been
whatever.
there. I've been to
Oh, you
the
have?
Traverse City. I've been to Traverse City one
Oh,
year.
nice, nice, nice. It's freaking God's country up there, right?
You
It's
have to fly,
beautiful.
right? Even from Detroit,
I, I
you can drive.
go.
No.
This goes back to the Ionic 5 range limit. I didn't want to stop. It's a 4-hour drive, and you actually have to park your car and then get on
Only,
the ferry because there's no cars on the island. It's only walking and horses.
only if we had battery swapping.
Oh my god! So I was gonna drive, but there's uh, a flight. I think it's twice a day out of DTW to an airport called Pelston. And here's a funny
Oh
story
boy.
for you, real quick, Lei. They gave us a swag bag and with fudge in it. And so everybody that checked into and was going to the gate for our flight had this box of fudge. And TSA, and God bless them, uh, they I was told that it looks through the X-ray like C4. And
Ugh,
so every bag that had the fudge in it, they had to open and check the
jeez.
fudge. So,
Uh,
these are these things that you don't know about until you travel, right, Lei?
yep.
You
Yep.
got that's why, and I know this now, and so I'll be more knowledgeable in the future. And like, anyways, man, it was a good experience, but I did absolutely no email checking the last 2 days, which means that we need to make sure we get off at 10 so I can actually do some work and you could go celebrate your daughter's graduation.
Yeah.
So,
No, I mean what you said about the event and the conference, I think shows a stark contrast between, let's just talk about the political system. You have a two-party here, you have a president, and then we're walking backwards on the California EV mandate, right? Which affects several other states. I think that was voted to be abolished. Is
it
that correct?
affects New York,
Right? In Massachusetts, where
Massachusetts,
I
and
am.
basically
Uh,
Democratic or left-leaning states.
you have that, and then you have the kind of the labor system, the union. You have, um, I mean, so many things go into, let's say, if you want to accomplish something, it's not as easy when you are kind of in China when you have a one party system that kind of goes top down and everybody just do it. It doesn't happen here like that in the U.S. So uh, that's the difficult part of. That's why it's so. Every time we go back and come back and go back and come back, it's seeing things
Well,
progress forward so much faster, and then coming back here, you see things going backwards a little bit.
we don't get political here, U.S. politics, Chinese politics, but I will say, as two immigrants um, that have made the United States our home and our family's home, some of the things that are happening are truly, heartbreaking, in my opinion. And because I believe immigrants are such an important part of the U.S. story, and they will continue to be. And what's happening is some of the things is not right. Anyways, um, that's kind of well. Anything else
Yeah,
that
I
you
mean,
had?
we had a kind of a two-week break. There was a lot of things going on. There's quite a few other earnings from the We Rise Ponies, Baidu, XPeng. Neo is reporting next Tuesday, I think. Uh, I mean, in the robotaxi space, it's also aside at their earnings. I mean, the volumes are getting significant uh, in terms of write-offs, right?
Which gives them scale, which gives them more cost control, which allows them to dictate and squeeze other smaller players.
Yeah.
Is that what happened with Luminar? Mm, maybe, but all we know is Austin is out.
And that was interesting. Yeah, it was out because of improper behavior, and then oh, bless you. And then we have
You
a
didn't hear
guy
me
in
though,
power.
right?
Sorry,
You didn't hear me though, dude.
no.
I
How'd
did.
you do
Okay,
that?
I just muted the mic.
Oh, cool.
So,
And then we have a new CEO with Stellantis
oh
Group.
yeah, that's right.
Somebody from within, unfortunately or fortunately. That was kind of um,
So here's the thing about
underwhelming.
Filosa. He's Italian, but he never worked in Europe. His background is more Brazil.
Americas, yeah.
Yeah, Latin America. And so when we heard him speak in LA, I liked him. He was apologetic about the dealer stuff, and he seems much more social media
Hmm.
friendly because
Hmm.
he's always posting, or his team is always posting him on LinkedIn. And so maybe he was politicking a little bit to become the CEO, but I was told he knew about a month ago. So, so yeah, congratulations to Antonio. Hopefully, maybe we'll have him on this show. But let me ask you this now that you bring that up, because we talked about Chevy leaving China. What about Peugeot Citroën? They've effectively left, right?
They're kind of well, they're kind of.
Zombies?
How should I put it?
How do you
Maybe
say
on the
zombie in
second to
Chinese?
last breath. Oh God, you got me.
Come on, man.
I forget all of a sudden.
Okay. I'm gonna have to ask my wife
Maybe
now.
I'll remember. Maybe I'll remember after we talk for a few minutes.
Okay.
僵尸.
Jiangzhi. Okay.
僵尸, yeah.
What does that literally mean? What are those two words
Literally
literally?
means a dried up corpse.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Okay. I knew you'd do it. So anyways,
yeah.
but let's do this. Let's go through some of the comments real quick because love that Jeffrey and SPX are dedicated viewers. Love that. I'm sure we don't say everything SPX and Jeff like, but that's what life is all about. You know, I appreciate that they are loyal listeners and viewers, the live ones too. So SPX says, alongside price cuts, BYD looking at you being the main weapon used. Well, I think Tesla SPX is also using price cuts as a way to kind of maintain volume. AI, advanced FSD, and ultra fast charging, 5C plus or BAAS, so battery as a service, are being implemented by many brands and cascading down to cheaper models. What are other ways car makers can have a meaningful edge to outcompete the peer? Oh, this is a great question. To outcompete the peers in China and globally.
Oh, that's a great question. I think what
We
Liotto
should have
said.
tackled this and talked about it for 20 minutes instead of the
Yeah,
last
no,
2
but
minutes.
look at what Liotto said. Li Xiang said in the earnings call. He said, if you talk about HMI, you think of Apple. If you talk about interior, the spatial kind of the innovations, he says, hopefully you think of Li Auto. And I think from the Shanghai Auto Show is really what, and even what the Maxtro SA100 showed is what capabilities of the interior cockpit, the seating arrangements, simple things as those could be a selling point. I mean, ADAS, right? Everybody's doing ADAS, but um, and how you tweak kind of the pricing. Tesla is announcing free transfer of assistance, right? Driver assistance if you purchase new the sexy models in China, also for a limited time, right? Um, it's
It should be noted that Tesla's going to be launching their robotaxi service, I think June 12th in Austin. So we're seeing a little bit of, hey, look over here, don't look over here, because the Model Y is starting to flatten out from a sales standpoint, and we're hitting summer. So with no real new products, the last half of 2025 for Tesla in China is going to be tough.
interesting that Elon, he said, right? He said bye bye to Doge, and then kind of like, I'm gonna be focusing on Tesla, SpaceX, full time now, and
Way too
kind of reassurance
much
for the investors.
pressure from
Yeah,
investors.
yeah,
Way too much pressure from
yeah,
investors, I
yeah,
think.
yeah.
And let me answer this. SPX, that's a great question. So this goes back to our friends Sam Livingstone and Robert Dooley, who work at Car Design Research. They have to build the brand because, to your point, uh, uh, Li Xiang said, when you think of user experience, you think of Apple. That's all a part of the brand. And Li Auto wants you to think of great interiors and user experience that way as Li Auto. That's what they need to do because you can't. You make a great point. You can't continue to just keep on cutting price. You cut price to eliminate players. And in China, this is a unique country in that way because in the United States or Europe, I think by now most companies would have called, waved the white flag. But in China, they just double down, triple down. We see Hi-Fi looking to license their model
Speaking of
to a
hi-fi,
Dubai company, right?
yeah, the Lebanon
Yeah, Lebanon, yeah.
EV Electra, it's
And
it's it's it's
then,
doomed. It's futile. It's going nowhere. So that's
well,
that.
but they're still around. They still pulse, whether it's faint or
Yeah.
not. Another company, Faraday Future, still a pulse. They still post things, so they make enough money to keep the lights on. Now, whether they're full-time players, we're seeing Neta now. So again, it's starting to happen. Companies are starting to get weaker, but I also know that there's pitch decks being flown around all these investment firms to try to save them. But I think if you continue to be consistent, I think Neo's been pretty consistent with their brand and their promise in because they are kind of the customer engagement brand, consumer, and so I think that's where you're going to start seeing more of a differentiation. Now, this is likely more important in the 200 and 250,000 RMB and above.
Mm-hmm.
BYD is the 800-pound gorilla and the 200,000 and below, but they can't own that market share and live in that space without some sharp elbows getting in there trying to grab some share. It's just like Tesla. They were 80% market share of the EV market in the United States. That was never going to be permanent. But if the pie is growing, then everybody can win until it starts to mature and customer acquisition costs increase significantly. And in order for me to grow in a mature market, I have to take share from Lei EV company. We
Mm-hmm.
can't just both grow.
Yeah.
Um, we're seeing volume starting to flatten out, although it's still growing in China. Like, I'm talking overall market. And as NEVs become a larger share of the total market, there's still some breathing room for some of these brands, but as customer acquisition costs grow higher and higher, I think it's going to be differentiating the brand, and yeah, maybe all of the above, like the whole the charging thing that you had mentioned, Lei. Having more convenience, faster charging. Because I agree. I don't know if you can just cut your way to global leadership like that in
And
perpetuity.
and the other important thing to note is this year, we still have the trade-in and the scrappage incentive in place. Now, come toward the end of the year, China is really going to have to think about what to do next year in terms of economic supportive policies. Do these continue or do they end? And how much of the market is propped up or helped with these kind of incentives? As it's no longer a new first buyer car market. It's a retentional market, right? Meaning now it's about people upgrading their existing vehicles. So I think next year, lack of these continuous supported policies, what's going to drive sales? Uh, that's something to watch out for, and that could be a stimulant of driving some of the weaker players out. That's what we
And
can.
and and I think SPX raises a rather good point. Does BYD have any other tricks? Obviously with the mega charging and the God's Eye, that surprised the market a little bit, but it's still primarily a price cut tool that they use and flood the market with product tool. So,
Yeah.
anyways, Jeffrey says, "Good morning, good evening, good morning, Jeffrey, or good evening,
Good
Jeffrey."
evening.
Yeah. He does say that the BYD rumor about the used cars is has some legs in China.
Oh, it definitely has. Right.
Been to the Neo House, the first Neo House. Pretty cool to see where it all started. Um, they started. William always comes by. Uh, he says that the SU7 crashes are still showing up in his WeChat groups. The Mega is so cool. Yes, I agree. The Mega is cool, but I don't know when the Mega is going to have a facelifted version, Jeff. And
Probably
he
not this
also
year. Next
he
year.
saw the ET5T updated version at Neo House. It was
Oh,
top.
but yeah. By the way, since there's big fans of Neo, I did have a chance to drive the ET9, and a few days earlier, I drove the ES6. So let me tell you how to compare these two different models.
Okay,
After driving the ET9, it felt like driving on cotton, and it puts the ES6 into shame of
is
how
that bad?
lux-
Is that
how
bad?
luxurious. I mean, I'm putting it in a good way. Not to say the ES6 isn't good, but yeah, the ET9 is definitely
No, but is that bad?
it's premium.
Like it,
It's
like, do you want that?
I, I don't know. I mean, but now you have this Maxtrail S800 is also, I think,
Has a
right?
version of clear motion.
Yeah. It's yeah.
So,
Um,
and then Jeffrey says, let's not forget McLaren owes Neo €1 billion. So, let's see here. Great insight, guys, as usual. That's from SPX. So that's all I have, man. I'm glad to
Same
be
here.
back talking with you after a 2-week hiatus. I think you and I have been a little bit busier than we have
Yeah.
in years
Yeah.
past. So, um, valid excuses. Oh, Roger Atkins says hello. He's been watching for a little bit here on the LinkedIn channel. So, hello, Roger. Hope you're well. Hopefully,
We'll
we'll
see
see
Roger
you
in Munich,
in Munich in September.
September.
And
Just about 3 months away. So,
yeah, man, looking forward to that too. Everyone, thanks for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We should be back at our same bat channel and bat time next week,
yep.
9 a.m.
Yep.
Eastern. I don't have
Hmm.
any issues that day. So we will talk with you all then.
All right.